Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more relationship family drama stories. In this video, my ridiculously entitled parents burnt down my house claiming that I don't deserve success and a family. Let's dive right into the video to find out what happened. The relationship between my parents and myself had never been good in my entire memory. The same goes for my relationship with my older sister, which I would consider even worse than the one with my parents. Growing up in my house was horrible, and my parents had no issues telling me, even as a young child, that they had never wanted a second kid. I was told to be grateful that they kept me at all instead of sending me to some orphanage. Of course, as a kid I believed their lies of bad kids ending up on the street or in homes with no roof and no food, so they fed me the bare minimum as it was, as I ended up with the food that was the scraps or the parts that got burnt and they were not gonna eat. It was the 80s at the time, and it was basically the only life I knew. There was no internet to see what the world was really like, and they did not want me making friends and seeing other families. The worst part was the fact that my sister got everything she wanted and was treated way better than I was. She got new clothes while I got thrift store bin fits. She had birthday parties while mine were totally ignored. When I did manage to have something and she wanted it, I learned what would happen if I said no. She would go to our parents, who would scream and hit me until I gave it to her. Abuse was not seen the same during that time. They could just lie and say that I roughhoused or was a naughty kid and get away with it. I got older and started spending as little time at home as I could. I would be at the library reading books and doing my homework. I got smart and managed to find a college that I could get in and afford while working on campus. I was living off dry cereal and ramen. It was way better than being at home. My world was open, and I finally was learning that what they did was abuse, and it was wrong. I did not speak to them much, but I didn't cut them out of my life either. The mental abuse made me still feel like I owed them something for keeping me and being my parents. I saw them on holidays and they would ask me about my job and my house and things like that. They of course had an ulterior motive the entire time, but the bit of attention made anything else go over my head. My sister was an alcoholic, but my parents refused to admit that there was anything wrong with her. They would say that she was stressed or that I was wrong the one time I brought up how much she was drinking when I was over for a holiday. I knew she was getting wasted on a daily basis. I also knew that she had no money and was clearly either getting or stealing it from our parents. I tried to ignore it all. My dad called me one day, which was really weird because the only one who ever called was my mom. Dad, I hope you're happy with what you did now. Me, huh? Dad, the years of us carrying you and now we are bankrupt. I bet this is what you wanted all along, huh? Me, but I didn't take any money from you. Dad, a burden that was the only thing you are. And now I bet you're gonna laugh about us not having a place to live. Me, I'm not laughing about anything. Dad, your mother and I have nowhere to go if you even care. Your sister is gonna be on the street unless you help. Me, I don't really feel comfortable letting her stay with me. Dad, she doesn't want you there. You have a house, just give it to her. Yeah, he didn't want me to let her live with me. He just wanted me to give the golden child my house. He did not care if it meant that I would be on the street instead. I told him I was not giving her my house and that I was not a kid anymore. If he tried to hit me, I was gonna fight back this time. I had decided years before that he would never lay a hand on me again. He hung up without another word and I did not get a call from anybody else. I came home from work 2 days later after getting a call that there was an emergency to see that there had been a huge fire. And my house was basically destroyed. One half seemed to be okay, but there was an open wall and a lot of water damage from the fire getting put out. I spoke to the head firefighter, who told me that it was probably not an electrical fire like they thought at first, but it had been arson. There was a clear path that it took that apparently showed that gasoline had been poured and then set on fire. I knew exactly who was to blame because I was not an idiot. I tried to call my dad, but did not get an answer from him. For once I was going on the offensive and drove down to confront them. They did not know that I was recording the entire thing. I went in to him looking smug and asking me if I regretted my decision now. My sister was there also looking smug and clearly drunk per usual. I asked him flat out how could he set my house on fire, and he laughed, thinking it was a big joke. He told me I was never meant to be born and did not deserve to have a house or a good life. He admitted at least 3 times that he did it, which was enough for me, and I left telling him that he wouldn't be hearing from me again. He told me that it was good and I did not deserve to have a family at all. So then I went to the police with the tape and an explanation of the long bad history I had with my family. They had no other suspects and it seemed good enough for them to go and make an arrest on my parents for doing this. It was only my dad at first, but he did not want to go down alone and admitted that my mom was also there and helped pour the gasoline. I can't prove if my sister was there or not, but they would cover for her no matter what anyway. I wish I could say there was some huge exciting trial, but honestly it was a pretty open and shut case once the police investigators were done with the scene and getting confessions from my parents. They did not confess on purpose either, they were just too dumb to keep their mouths shut without a lawyer. They were both going to prison for arson in the end, but my dad especially figured out that I should have to go to jail too because I set them up with recording them in secret. I was not in any trouble and they were of course angry. As for my sister though, she didn't do well without my parents funding her. Last I heard she was on the streets and probably any money she got was going towards alcohol as per usual. I cannot find it in myself to feel sympathetic for any of them though. If I could go back I would rather they did not keep me and send me somewhere else for another family to raise me instead. My past is surreal and the only reason my future doesn't seem dull is because I know they are not going to be a part of it. As for my house, I couldn't get money from them since they really were bankrupt and had nothing. Luckily my insurance covered most of the damage, so I did not end up in a bad situation like they had wanted me to be. And the next one is titled, "My daughter's father sent a priest to harass me" on r/entitledparents. To those that don't know, my daughter, 6 years old, was born from a one-night stand with Jeff. And by the way, if you watched until here, please don't forget to like the video, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because it would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. So anyway, we were never romantically involved. It was a simple one-night stand and we did use contraceptives, but they failed. A few months ago, Jeff went full psycho and tried to convince me to leave my daughter with him so she could serve as a replacement child for his wife who recently lost their infant daughter. I refused to do that and right now we are in the middle of some legal issues. Now for today, I thankfully didn't deal with Jeff, instead he sent a priest to harass me at work. I'm going to be very blunt, I'm completely detached from religion. I'm not an atheist, I just don't like the idea of the Catholic Church. That's the leading religion in my home country. So I respect it and most of my family is Catholic, so I have a detached respect for church officials. Today I was doing some paperwork when I got a call about a priest asking for me. I did not have any meetings scheduled and a lot of times we get visits from clergy asking for donations or participation in events, so I figured that was it. I told the secretary to let him in and things at first seemed rather polite, shake hands asking how things were, the usual chit-chat. Then the priest began talking about how it had come to his attention that I was a single woman with a child and that apparently I lived a life of debauchery and hate. His words. I was taken aback and agreed that I was a single mother, but that I did not see how I lived in debauchery and hate. The priest then went on about how he knew my daughter is prohibited from spending time with her father and that I am constantly sleeping around with men instead of living a so-called godly life. How he was worried and thought it would be best that I considered giving my daughter a chance to live with a proper family rather than see me sell myself. Me being angry was an understatement. I did keep it civil simply because I was at work and I had no intentions of screaming to a religious man at work. I simply told him that my daughter was fine with me, she lived a safe and happy life, my personal affairs were my own, and that I had no intentions of sending her to another household. I told him that if there was nothing else, he should probably leave as I had other things to attend to. He then showed his hand and that is how I know it was Jeff's doing. The priest told me that he did not think my daughter would be a happy child with me, but her father was well respected in his church and he knew he would raise a proper Christian lady. At that I laughed and simply said no. I once again recommended that he left and if he didn't I would be calling security on him. He left saying he would try to speak to me again when I'm not being hysterical. I told my secretary and our security not to let him into my office again and I called my lawyer. I don't have audio, but we do have a security feed from him walking into my office. Thank you again to everyone sending well wishes in my previous post. We are still working on that move, but school is back and she is loving it. We still have that temporary restraining order against Jeff and his wife and school officials know it. Small update, I had a lovely talk with our local bishop. This priest was indeed a real one, but the bishop assured me I won't hear from him again. He was very apologetic and I'm comfortable with how our conversation went. And the next one is titled, My mother thinks she is entitled to alcohol at my wedding. So my fiancé, 35 male, and I, 33 NB, are getting married in 2 weeks in our backyard. We will be having a catering spread for our reception afterwards. We decided to have a dry wedding for 2 reasons. My mom is an alcoholic who is known for making a scene when she gets drunk, and my fiancé has a brother who binge drinks and has had alcohol poisoning on more than one occasion. He does not drink all the time, but if he starts, he cannot stop until he either passes out or someone physically restrains him from getting more. I also have an uncle, mom's brother, and a stepdad who are in recovery and don't need the temptation. Neither fiancé and I are big drinkers, so we decided to just avoid any problems and just have a dry wedding. We will have a less dry reception party and honeymoon with some of our friends later on, but all of our families have been supportive, and uncle was especially grateful for us for doing this since he takes his recovery very seriously and has been 7 years sober. I sent out wedding invitations 4 months ago and said it would be a dry wedding and asked people not to bring alcohol. Now today I get this call from my mom, who I also sent an invitation to 4 months ago. Mom, is it true you're not having alcohol at your wedding? Me, yes, fiancé and I decided we didn't want alcohol during our special time. Mom, that is so silly. It's going to make your wedding boring. Me, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but fiancé and I have made our decision. We want everyone to feel comfortable at our wedding. Mom, clearly you don't care about my comfort. What if I want to have a little drink to pass the time? Me, like you did at different uncle's wedding where you got so drunk and made a horrible scene calling uncle's wife a gold digger? Mom, it was not my fault. They made the drinks there too strong. Me, right, I really wish you would address this need to have alcohol wherever you go. Mom, I don't need to have alcohol. I just think your wedding will be boring without it. You want to have a fun wedding, don't you? Me, it will be a fun wedding. We don't need alcohol to have fun, by the way. Mom, this is so stupid. Why should everyone else be punished just to make it comfortable for a few people? It seems like you care more about uncle and stepdad than anyone else. Me, or maybe I just want to avoid any scenes. Mom, I just told you that wasn't my fault. Me, just like your DUI is not your fault, right? Mom, how dare you bring up that difficult time in my life? I was going through a lot emotionally. What the hell is wrong with you kids? You need to mind your own business. If I want to drink, that's my business. Me, well, my wedding is my business too. We don't want alcohol there. That's final. I cannot stop you if you decide to pre-game my wedding, but I've already made it clear to uncles and brothers that if you cause a scene, you are to be made to leave. My mom then starts crying and says, why do you kids hate me so much? What did I ever do to deserve to be treated like this by my children? Me, are you really ready for me to go down that list? Mom, none of you understand. None of you will ever understand. I'm the mother of the bride. I should be treated better than this. Me, I think I've treated you pretty well during this process. I've acquiesced to your boyfriend, whom I don't even know, coming to my wedding. I've even given in to some of your other demands. So please tell me how you've been mistreated. Mom, you didn't invite me to go dress shopping. The mother of the bride always goes dress shopping with her daughter. I barely know fiancé because you never bring him around me. How do I know that you're marrying the right person? Me, well, that's because Aunt made my dress. Mom then sarcastically, well, isn't that just special? Me sighing, as for the rest, I think you know why. We are not really close enough for you to have any say in who my significant other is. Honestly, Mom, I'm done with this conversation. If you really feel that strongly about this, I will understand if you don't want to attend my wedding. Mom, oh, I bet you would like that, wouldn't you? One way or another, you will respect me as your mom. Me, sure mom, I'm hanging up now, bye. Guys, I'm so livid right now, I have half a mind to uninvite her. I spoke to my dad and her brother, and my uncle thinks her drinking is getting really bad again and has been wanting to hold an intervention. I told him I'm focused on the wedding right now, but that I definitely agree this was out of line and something needs to be done. What do I do though? I don't want her ruining my wedding, but I'm so tired of dealing with this. Sorry, this is probably above Reddit's pay grade, but I just needed to vent. Update to the story, I sent a text reiterating the rules. She said she knows where she isn't welcome and said that she won't attend. My dad told me not to worry about this anymore and that he will see to it that she doesn't ruin my wedding. Update number 2, I sent this text to my mom. Mother, at this point I'm going to officially uninvite you from my wedding. I'm not gonna allow you to change your mind and I would prefer it if you not come to my wedding at all given your poor behavior. At this point, I've decided I don't want any further contact with you unless you decide to curb your toxic behaviors and drinking. I wish you the best and I hope you can find a way to heal, but I cannot do this anymore. I'm sorry if this hurts you, but I cannot handle you in my life anymore. If you try to force the issue, I will be forced to take legal action up to and including contacting law enforcement. Please don't contact me again. I went to delete her from my Facebook page only to find a post that she had written saying how being a mother is a thankless job and how she doesn't understand how she raised rude and judgmental kids. She ended it by saying that she hopes her kids get over themselves someday. Honestly, I'm done. This sucks, but it's been a long time coming. My head hurts. Update to the story, it's not a huge update, but I guess my grandparents and uncles have had enough too. They decided to stage an intervention next weekend. If she refuses to get help, she will no longer be welcome at family events and she will no longer be part of the family. They told me not to worry about it, and my sister will go as she's the only one of her children that even has a real relationship with her, but even my sister said that if she doesn't get help, she will cut her off too. I'm hoping and praying that this works, but given that she spent 1 year in rehab and the second she was off probation chose to drink again, does not give me a lot of hope. My dad told me he's hiring the local biker gang to act as security. We live in a small town and the nearest big city is about an hour away, so it would be really expensive to have a security company come out. I don't have a problem with that. This is the type of gang that helps out abused kids and animals, and they do a lot of good where I live. The worst I've heard about them is they doled out some rural justice to a guy that was beating up the sister of one of the members and ran him out of town. When my mom got her DUI, she ran into someone's house and car. When she tried to back out, no one was hurt, thank goodness, and I guess it was the house of a relative of someone in the gang, so they agreed to help, and my dad is paying them to be security just in case. They know my family, one of my dad's cousins is a member, and they know my mom. I think she dated a guy in the gang at one point, and what to look out for. It may be moot if she ends up in rehab. I'm not stressing about her anymore either way. I have 13 days until my wedding. I'm gonna focus on the final touches and just enjoy myself. My biological mom made her choices. Now that I've stood up for myself, I feel nothing but relief. My stepmom will be there and I see her more as my real mom, so it's all fine. I've been going through a lot of therapy already, so I've had to make peace with how my actual mom is. And the next one is titled Revenge on Grandma from Hell. I am Indian, and in my country till a few years ago you could get steel utensils from door-to-door vendors in exchange for clothes. This barter system still exists in villages and some small towns. My grandma, being the insane hoarder that she was, loved getting utensils in this manner. Utensils that no one else was allowed to touch, that she would never use and would only gather dust in her room. Anytime my stepmom or my dad tried to donate our old clothes to charity, she would throw a hissy fit. She would collect all the clothes we weren't going to wear anymore so she could exchange them for pots and pans. At times she would take it a step further and demand clothes that we were still going to wear. She would insist that they don't fit us anymore or some other BS argument to get us to hand them over. Seriously, we had to sometimes fight her to keep our clothes. But she never, I mean never, gave away her own clothes. She only took garments from others, namely me, my dad, my stepmom, and my stepbrother. When I was around 21, I had just lost a lot of weight and needed new clothes. Yes, I lived with my parents. In India, you cannot afford to live independently unless you have a well-paying job, and I was in college at the time. So one day, I went to a local store's clearance sale and bought a bunch of new threads. I left them on my bed and went off to a friend's place. When I returned a few hours later, my new clothes were gone. My dad, stepmom and brother were not home, so I figured out instantly who must have taken them. I confronted the grand monster and asked what she had done with my clothes. She was sitting on her bed admiring her latest haul of pots and pans. Without even looking up, she told me my clothes were ugly and too westernized. And she did the right thing by exchanging them for something useful. And by the way guys, that reminds me, if only I could exchange my girlfriend's handbags for something useful, that would just be amazing. Maybe I can exchange them for some motorcycle tools or something. Anyway, as you can imagine, I lost my temper. I yelled, cursed at her, called her every name in the book, and she had the audacity to actually defend her actions. That evening there was a major showdown in our home. I was still livid and asked my dad exactly how long we were going to put up with her abuse. My stepmother and I don't get along, but when one of us was up against Grandmonster, the other always lent her support. This was no different. My stepmother agreed with me wholeheartedly. My dad told Grandmonster that she was now forbidden from entering my room without my prior permission. She started to fake cry and said we were all being so cruel to her. My dad later came to my room and said he would make it up to me and buy me new clothes. I, of course, was still livid and I was not about to let that cow have this victory. My Grandmonster needed sleeping pills to fall asleep. She took them even during the day. And she slept like the dead. A few days later, I snuck into her room during her afternoon nap. I opened her utensils trunk, yes, she had a whole trunk full of them, and took out a whole bunch of her beloved pots, glasses, plates, etc. I shut the lid quietly and exited. I went straight to an old age shelter that was nearby. I donated the utensils and earned the joy of giving and the taste of sweet, sweet revenge. I did not tell anyone what I had done and just waited for Grandma to discover her loss, which she did just a few days later. It happened in the evening. I was in the kitchen cooking dinner when I heard her ear-piercing wailings about how someone had stolen from her utensils chest. A satisfied smile spread across my face. My dad called me into Grandmonster's room and asked if I knew anything about the missing utensils. I admitted that I had taken and donated them. Grandma looked like her head would explode. I calmly told her I had done the right thing because those utensils were ugly and that the shelter needed them more. And clearly, if she could come into my room and take my things without asking, I could jolly well do the same. I think my dad was upset with me but really had nothing to say to me. He spent the next hour or so trying to calm his mother down. I slept so well that night. When Grandma died a few years later, the first of her belongings that we got rid of were those damn utensils. And the next one is titled Grandma Revenge 2.0, and it is another story of the Indian author from just now. I literally found out about this yesterday and I am still laughing at my mom's pettiness. My parents have just finished up an incredibly messy divorce due to my dad having several mental illnesses that he refuses to get treated for, including stealing marital money, being emotionally and financially abusive, cheating, and a plethora of other stuff. For as bad as he is, his parents, specifically his mother, are worse. The garbage my paternal grandma has put my mom through could be its own post or its own novel, to be honest, but let me try to provide some context. We are Indian, but my parents immigrated to America after marriage and had my sister and I in the USA. My grandma kicked my mom out of the apartment after mom gave birth to me, threw her passport in her face and told her to GTFO and go back to India since she thinks she is so smart and independent. Grandma now denies it ever happening now. Last year when my grandparents visited, they stole a lot of valuable stuff from the house to make sure it would not go to my mom in the divorce. They also got their green cards so they could officially move here and left behind suitcases full of their clothes. My father and his parents have lived to make my mom miserable for 23 years and she has finally gotten free. Once the house sells, we can officially go no contact with that whole side of the family. However, we cannot do that until the house sells. Now here comes the petty revenge. My mom was cleaning the house for another house showing when she found my grandparents' suitcases full of clothes. She took all of my grandmother's petticoats, used when wearing a sari, and tore them up, and we now use them as bedding for my 2 guinea pigs. Anyone who has had guinea pigs knows that while they are adorable, they are stinky and love to poop and pee wherever they feel like it. I know it is a tiny revenge, but it makes me so happy to know that my piggies are frolicking amongst that witch's torn petticoats, and when she finally comes back here, she won't have anything to wear. And the last one is titled Don't Ruin My Dreams. When I was in nursing school, my dream was to become a nurse anesthetist CRNA. In order to get accepted into anesthesia school, you almost always have to have a couple of years of ICU experience. My first job was in mental health for a year, and then I was fortunate enough to be hired into an ICU. My preceptor was nasty to me, just very condescending, would berate me to the point where other nurses were like, "Maybe you should bring this into one of the rooms," etc. She would send long emails to the nurse manager of everything I was doing wrong, made me feel stupid for asking questions. It was just not a good experience. She was also very arrogant, saying how when she was a new nurse in the ICU, she got taken off of orientation early because she was just so good. She would also brag about her fancy expensive wedding that was going to be featured in a magazine. I just hated her. Her fiancé was a CRNA, and it was also her dream to become an CRNA. She was in the process of applying to schools when she was precepting me and would tell us how her fiancé would help her take the knowledge quizzes that were part of the admissions process at some of the schools. So I left that job after a month or so because I was so stressed and ended up transferring to a different hospital. I harbored deep resentment for this chick and would occasionally Facebook stalk her. I learned she had started CRNA school at a college in Texas. They had uprooted their lives, they were married by this point, and moved from Florida to Texas so she could go to this school. So I sent the school an email explaining how she had cheated on her admissions test and that her husband helped her, and that this type of behavior is contrary to the values held by the school. She got kicked out. Ruin my dream, I will ruin you. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.